We are currently going into match 4, I believe, correct?
Yep.
With Jarvis being ahead right now in the best of 5. He's up 2-1. So far, we've seen Jarvis bring Miracles and Briksza's Control, and Rudy has brought Blue-Black Omnitel and Humans. Yeah. So if you want to check out those matches, feel free to take a look at the VODs. It's pretty exciting. We're in match point right now, though, and Jarvis is playing Briksza's Control. Rudy is going to bring his 3rd deck into the field.
Who would have thunk it?
Who would have thunk it? Yeah. So it looks like we're going to be in for a grindy blue, black, red mirror match. Honestly, these lists look exactly the same to me. Maybe like plus or minus 1 or 2 cards.
Yeah. Would you like me to help out with some of the subtleties that I think I say?
You read my mind.
So Jarvis is playing the 4th hymn, and Rudy is choosing to play 3 Jace and 3 Snapcaster, where Jarvis, I believe, has 2 Jace, 4 Snapcaster. The rest of it is fairly similar. I believe it's him versus Kolaghan's command. So I think Jarvis has 2 Kolaghan's command, 4 hymns. Mm-hmm. In the board for the matchup, Rudy having True Name Nemesis, I do like a lot because there's not the most answers to it. And like Diabolic Edict is probably the most efficient answer to it besides the Red Blast. And then, but Edict is bad against the strict Snapcaster plan. So I actually do think Rudy's list has a slight edge in the matchup.
Interesting. Yeah, I mean, Rudy's also got 3 copies of Jace the Mind Sculptor, right? Doesn't Jarvis only have 2?
Yeah. Yep.
Okay, so that's another big player. So going into this, Rudy's going to, you're saying Rudy's ahead? I know Rudy did beat Noah Walker in the Grixis Mirror. Mm-hmm. So, I mean, let's see if he also is able to slay Jarvis and take us to a game 5.
Yeah.
When the players are ready.
I am just hoping for a game 5, so still impartial, but, game 5.
Right. So both players looking at 7 cards. I'm not really impressed by either one of them.
So keep in mind, Rudy knows the matchup and Jarvis doesn't.
Okay.
And that just makes it very hard. So, like, when you aren't Ponder Brainstorming, you have this land heavy hands. Like, yes, if your opponent hymns you, it's, like, better. And, like, it's worse if you, like, mulligan. But you also just are not doing anything. And I just hate mulliganing in Legacy. I mean, he knows he's not playing against a Wasteland deck, but his draw's just so bad if he never draws a Brainstorm. But the fact that this hand's like decent against discard spells, whatever that means, like, yeah, I think it is discipline for Rudy Mulligan. I don't know if I'd be able to make the same decision.
Oh yeah, I do that so many times with Miracles where I'm just like, oh, Counterspell and Jace the Mind Sculptor and 5 lands, whatever, I'll keep, and then just promptly get killed on like turn 2 because I don't have a removal spell or something like that.
Yeah.
But yeah, Rudy's definitely going to keep here. I think he's scried to the top because he's not fetching to cast the Ponder, so it must have been another blue spell. Yeah. Jarvis's hand.
Well, also, Rudy knows the matchup. And if your Ponder, so in that situation, if your Ponder's not looking for something in particular, it is probably best kept in your hand, unless if you're trying to fuel an Angler or turn 3 Snapcaster Mage, which isn't as common now that Liliana the Last Hope has been played in the main.
Right. So Inquisition of Kozilek here is going to reveal to Jarvis all. What do you think he takes here?
I might have actually taken the K command. So, because Rudy already chose to keep with his Ponder, and like it is true that the Ponder gets a kind of like pseudo tutor for a card with all these fetch lands, but the K command just being a clean 2-for-1 in a deck that's like chock full of 2-for-1s, like if I recall correctly, the way the Grixis Control Mirror works is either Planeswalker based or like you just have the last Baleful Strix in play because you end up like 2-for-1ing each other and you have like all these winky dink removal spells. Right. Kolaghan's command kind of like lends itself very well to that, whereas like he's pretty far away from like Snap Kolaghan's commanding because he mulliganed and he doesn't have as many lands. So I think I might have taken the Kolaghan's command.
Interesting. Yeah, I mean, that's a tough call. But Hymn to Torok is going to nab both of Rudy's lands, so that means Rudy's in a tough position. Yeah, that's one of the reasons. Like, the Hymn to Torok's floor is just like, you draw it when your opponent has nothing in hand, and then the ceiling is just like, turn 2, gut them for both their lands, because, I mean, random is just like, taking cards at random is crazy.
And Jarvis chose to play for Hymn to Torok, so he definitely rewarded for that decision. We don't know if that's the 4th one, but, like,
it just speaks to the power of the card too, right? Like,
yeah.
So Jarvis now has Force of Will and Brainstorm here. So if Rudy draws a land, do you think he slams the Jace here? And if so, do you think Jarvis Force of Will's pitching Brainstorm or casts the Brainstorm?
So I think Rudy can identify that Jarvis would have played a Snapcaster Mage or probably any creature that isn't Gurmag Angler this turn. And he probably would have played Liliana, the Last Hope, if he drew it. So, like, Rudy can very quickly just start to narrow down the cards that are in Jarvis's hand. Mm-hmm. So I think Rudy would be in the situation that he knows that Jarvis's hand is reactive in some sort, either between removal spells or counter spells. And the fact that the only counter spell is Force of Will, I think playing your own version of him to Torok is a good idea. Which is what Rudy's doing currently. Right.
For sure. Yeah, so this is interesting now. Like, this is pretty much mathematics, right? You Brainstorm or not with the expectation of finding another blue card.
Yeah, I think you're not allowed to cast Brainstorm here. Like, even if the statistics are in your favor, like on average, like say if there's a, 20% chance you miss, like I think this board state still advantages you a certain amount. Like, he does know that Rudy has K command in his hand, but you can just lose the game. Like, you just lose if you don't get another blue spell.
And Jarvis, no fear, goes for it and is rewarded by finding another blue card. However, it is another Brainstorm.
Like, what do we even accomplish?
Yeah, and now like, we realize...
The probability, come on.
We do realize Jarvis is a little bit locked right now. His hand is not the greatest, but, I mean... it's not like Rudy's doing anything either, so we're just going to see a little bit of Drago. And this is kind of what I feel like the matchup usually boils down to, is like, because it's a mirror match, it's all about like haymakers and like what you can get to stick. And that's part of the reason why I also think that Rudy's a little bit favored in this matchup, just because small things, like he has got the third Jace, like you mentioned, another Diabolic Edict to answer Gurmag Angler, so on and so forth.
So real quick, I want to go back to the Brainstorm play, because I do think it's a play pattern that comes up commonly in Legacy, and no matter what Ponder Brainstorm Force of Will deck you're playing. And pretty much like the subset of blue cards you're going to hit are also cantrips, so you also end up diluting your deck. So it happened there, which made me remember it sooner. So like, if you hit Brainstorm or Ponder, those cards are better draws. So you're choosing to make your draw step worse in an effort to get 2+ blue cards. Like, really, at the end of the day, the reason why we're casting Brainstorm there is to hit more blue cards. And so it's not the probability of hitting a single blue card. That just gets you to parity. And it's even worse in some scenarios, because now you're not drawing that blue card later on. Right. It's actually the probability of hitting 2+ blue cards, and then versus not hitting the blue cards, and then like the middle being the wash. And I think like where you just hit one blue card that you would want to draw naturally anyway. So thinking about it even more, I don't think I would cast Brainstorm there.
Interesting. So both players have been going Drago for a while, stocking up on their hands. We see a lot of removal and some copies of Kolaghan's Command, but we have yet to see any player like draw Baleful Strix or something proactive that you can just put on the table here. One thing that is really interesting to me is that neither player is really committing their lands to the battlefield. I like that for a couple of reasons. You insulate yourself against him to Torok a little bit, and also you make your cantrips later on, like Brainstorms, a little bit better.
And Kolaghan's Command.
Exactly, and Kolaghan's Command as well. So just a little play pattern to pick up, when you are in the Grixis Control mirror.
Yep. Yeah, it's actually, I'm a huge fan of like playing other games to get better at Magic. Mm-hmm. And if you ever played Exploding Kittens, it actually ends up devolving into control mirrors.
Okay.
If you play it correctly, and this kind of is how that would play. So involving him to Torok's Thoughtseizes and Kolaghan's Command are just cards in Exploding Kittens, and then you can like do that here. Like Rudy choosing to pick a spot here is something that I've seen before playing that game.
Right, and I really like the sequencing by Rudy. So he really held on to the Thoughtseize, first so that he could keep Force of Will open with 5 mana, second so that he could protect his threat by using Thoughtseize proactively to resolve a threat in the same turn, and he's rewarded here because he's going to go up a couple of cards.
Yeah.
Now, going back to what I was...
adjust my lighting. All right.
Oh, yeah, sure. Going back to what I was saying, this matchup is just really predicated on having bombs, though. So, you can always like try to reduce your opponent to... how do I say this? You can reduce your opponent to not Trade your bombs for Force of Wills, like sort of pseudo Hymn-to-Torax is a really good way to sort of simplify the game in your favor. Interestingly enough here, would you Force of Will to Liliana?
Yeah, it's like pretty important, but you do have a lot of these dead cards. What's in Jarvis's graveyard? Does he have a Snapcaster?
I don't see one.
So the answer is no. In that case, I'm perfectly content with just wasting Bolt and either Kolgon's command or another Bolt on it. Yeah. You're right. I would burn it out.
Yeah, so that's interesting. We'll see if that comes back later to cause Rudy some problems. I mean, I in this sort of matchup, I know it sounds crazy, but I do love just rather than pitch a card to Force of Will, I'd much rather just like 5 mana, 5 mana hard cast Force of Will, and especially if you like, so in this situation, right, the lightning bolts don't really do much, but like the Jace would be very well paired with the Force of Will. Rudy's going to wait though, and I do like that a lot. He's going to wait till he draws maybe like a Snapcaster or another Thoughtseize or.
So one thing that's also interesting about control mirrors in general, but it's you get to see it here, is that even though there is this concept of card advantage, especially in game ones, there's like virtual card advantage too. Like there's only a subset of cards that matter. So the fact that Jarvis is never going to be able to play another Liliana the Last Hope in this game is like very important to how game flow works. So it's a lot harder for Jarvis to like 2-spell on a given turn, trying to like push an advantage.
Right.
And it's like pretty interesting.
And that's a lot of that has to go with like, just identifying deck lists and being very well versed in the legacy format. So that, that's one list that you just don't have to worry about playing around later on. And so you can always, just keep your Force of Will or whatever card it is that you would normally save for that card for something else. So we'll see,
right.
Maybe Gurmag Anglers get more aggressively.
I'm a genius. I just put the light on my phone.
Whoa. There you go. Who is this? I don't even recognize you anymore.
Yeah, hi, I'm WatchWolf92, and I only exist on Magic Online. Okay, so Rudy building up a board here, and knowing that he can't be punished by a Liliana the Last Hope is like very big game here.
Right. And even like this is what we saw earlier in the Blue-Black Omni versus Miracles matchup. These X1s are actually going to provide like a lot of chip damage.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, there's only 2 ways this game goes. It's either Planeswalkers or this. Mm-hmm. And, Rudy just ended up in the situation that allowed him to play this game. Like, Jarvis hasn't drawn very many Mole Drifter effects.
Yeah. But Gurmag Angler is a pretty big draw here.
Yeah, it leads to an interesting situation, but Rudy having access to Jace kind of like thwarts that a little, but of course Jarvis doesn't know that, and he does get to leave up Force of Will this turn, so this Angler should at least force more action on Rudy's side. But if there's anything I know about Rudy, he knows how to try to push an advantage.
Mm-hmm. And so in this situation, we're going to see the third Jace the Mind Sculptor get countered by a Force of Will, so kind of like how Jarvis, Rudy knows Jarvis has no more Lilianas left. Yep. Jarvis now knows Rudy has no more. God, this is really confusing. More Jace the Mind Sculptors left.
And that's a very important observation, because that means Rudy pretty much has to win with either his own Liliana the Last Hope or with creatures. And knowing that a person has to win with creatures makes your creature removal better. Whereas before, there's this dimension of Planeswalkers. Like, Planeswalkers just like revolutionized and like changed the game entirely when they were printed. And it's always felt like the older formats are a little bit slower to adapt to them or really understand how they're supposed to interact with them, because their tools were designed for creatures, not for Planeswalkers.
So Baleful Strix for the turn is going to be met with a Fatal Push, and I guess that makes sense because you really want to, like, the Snapcaster Mage attacking for 2 a turn actually has a lot of value. This is it's reasonably telegraphing that there's a Lightning Bolt or some sort of burn spell in Rudy's hand. So, we saw Jarvis not block last turn. I don't think much has changed that would make him, block this turn. And so burning the Fatal Push here means that you can connect for another 2 points of damage and continue sort of just, getting these incremental advantages.
Yeah, so there's actually... I almost wanted to attack with the Strix too. Like, I haven't done the full math, but like, these players are close to just finishing this with burn as well. So if you attack with both Snapcaster and Strix, what I'm wondering is if that leads you to a line where you're able to later on block with the Snapcaster Mage, have like Strix deal a point of damage, then you can bolt Kolaghan's Command, get back Snapcaster, bolt. And I think it might end up similarly, but I think if you attack with Strix as well this turn, I think Jarvis might not do this play. Like, exactly. I think you might have just dealt an extra point of damage. I would have taken more time to think about this play. I don't have the right answer off the top of my head. But I think there's not the most things Jarvis could have done to punish you if you attack with the Strix there as well.
Well, this is kind of scary because I think Jarvis has lethal in burn.
Yeah, it's the exact opposite problem.
And Rudy's going to recognize this and fatal push the Snapcaster Mage, sort of just to make sure that he doesn't, because 5 points of damage is a lot, and when you get below 10, that's where you need to be very cautious about the bolt snap bolt lines. So I really like that fatal push there.
Yeah, it's a lot better than trying to push the angler, definitely. So I think Strix is his only option in the graveyard, correct?
Looks like it.
I don't think I agree with that. I think you're starting. I'm just trying to think if there's a way that you can get more value from this Snapcaster Mage blocking, or if you can set up, because he had Kolaghan's Command and Lightning Bolt, right? But he knows Jarvis has a Snapcaster, but he doesn't have a K command in his graveyard anymore, correct?
Are we talking Jarvis doesn't have a K command, but Rudy
yeah, Jarvis. So I think you might have, I think Jarvis, I think Rudy might have been better off trying to set up a line where he just kills the Gurmag Angler.
Well, let's see what this Baleful Strix
Drawing Inquisition is very good now, and I didn't really take into account a lot of Rudy's potential draw steps. I'm just trying to think how he can win with the tools he can have, like that he already has access to. Still a tough position for Rudy that I have to watch the VOD. I feel like there's probably a line that leads to us being up a creature.
Okay. And that's interesting. I do like that Jarvis targeted the Lightning Bolt instead of something like a Brainstorm. Just realizing that there might... Oh, wait, no, he knew about the Baleful Strix from the K command. So what's interesting, though, is I guess either way, the Bolt is going to hit the Strix anyways, and Rudy is going to take 5 points of damage from the Gurmag Angler. So maybe he shouldn't have cast a Baleful Strix, just waited until the flashback period ended, but dagger. Rudy's not going to find an answer to the Gurmag Angler, and Jarvis is going to take game 1.
All right, control mirrors. This is my favorite magic. Any mirror of any sort is. So I guess I'm really speaking for both of them and the approach. So common Legacy. I don't know. The lore in Legacy is that when you play fair matchups, you board out your Force of Wills. And we see both of the players doing that here. And it makes sense. You can make the argument oh, no, there's Planeswalkers and all these haymakers. No, you're probably just going to get valued at some point in the time. And these Hymn to Toraks are good for a reason. And doing that to yourself probably isn't good. And you can just play more haymakers instead. We see one thing that's going to be interesting here is the Spell Pierce versus Flusterstorm. I hope we get to see both sides shine in some degree. So Spell Pierce gets to hit early Planeswalkers, and if I were Rudy, I wouldn't really play around Spell Pierce, and I think it's a good call that Jarvis brought it. But once Rudy sees it, and if this goes to game 3, I think Flusterstorm becomes the better card. I've always said I'm too weak of a player to be able to play Flusterstorm correctly, so that's why I play Spell Pierce. I don't try to make all these extravagant lines that way I could counter 2 spells with Flusterstorm or anything like that. It's too complicated for me. But so besides boarding out Force of Will, boarding out some spot removal makes sense. So we see Jarvis bringing out both Edicts, actually, which is interesting because Rudy has True Name Nemesis, so I wonder if he sees that, if he'll make a change in game 3.
Yeah.
Another thing that I've seen, and I don't necessarily know how I feel, is Surgical Extraction. You being a Miracles pilot, probably see a wide range of what people will do against you with regards to Surgical. And I guess I'm more talking pre-AK, because I think with AK you just have to play Surgical now. in some regard. But how do you feel just in Legacy with Surgical in the Control v Control matchups?
Typically, so I think Surgical Extraction is a card with a very high ceiling and a very low floor, right? You can get very punished for drawing Surgical at the wrong time, but at the same time, when it works, it's really good. And so it's about, I mean, like when you board in a card like Surgical Extraction in a fair matchup like the Mirror, you have to play with it very seriously in mind. Otherwise, you're not going to be able to maximize the impact of that card. But typically also, like I do prefer cards that are closer to 50-50 where I can leverage my play skill to maximize the value of the card. And so that's why I personally wouldn't bring in Surgical Extraction, but I could definitely see it.
I think I would bring in 2 if I could. Just because, so kind of extrapolating from the Corey Burkhart, like Briksza's Control deck in Modern, it's just like so Snapcaster Kolaghan's Command centric that if you just eliminate Snapcaster Mage or get a free like mental misstep on like what you're trying to target. So if you either remove the Kolaghan's Command or the Snapcaster Mage, a whole dimension is cut off.
Right. And
it's pretty unlikely, like, Kolaghan's Command's innately a 2-for-1, right? Him to Torok's innately a 2-for-1. You're already going to be 2-for-1ing. And like, if you're cutting a 1-for-1 for Surgical, you can make Surgical cut off like one of those ones. Like, yes, if they play Kolaghan's Command, like make you discard, get back my like Snapcaster, and you end up Surgicaling the Snapcaster. Like, yes, you are down a card, but Kolaghan's Command was always going to be a 2-for-1.
Right. So back to the match, we have both players going draw-go for a couple turns. We see him to Torok resolving from Jarvis's side, and this sort of, goes back to his specific version of the deck, and like how he constructed the deck. He's got 4 copies, so he's really trying to play towards him to Torok to, generate an advantage. Both players actually have really stacked hands right now. I'm curious. Now, this is a really interesting play. Lightning bolting the Baleful Strix. How do you feel about that?
Let's see. I will start off by saying, like, it appears to be a mature play to me. Like, that's I don't think that's something like level 1, someone that pick up Grixis Control but understands Magic would not Lightning Bolt a Mold Drifter type of card like that, especially a 1/1. Then level 2 is like this is the whole big brain thing, right? Like level 2 is like, okay, I actually know that 7 turns from now I'm gonna have to bolt that, and that's gonna deal me X amount of damage. But I think where I end up landing is I'm enabling my opponent's Kolaghan's Command where they might not have action otherwise. And if I were Rudy, I understand him brainstorming there, but I would have been very tempted to just discard, get back my Strix, and then I could play Strix with Pyroblast up. So,
So that's a really good point there. I think maybe that's the kicker, to not bolt the Baleful Strix, just the access to Kolaghan's Command. I mean, typically we do see 3 in each deck. But yeah, good observations. So moving forward, now Jarvis has his own Baleful Strix, drawing Pyroblast as a defensive option against, the Jace and the Snapcasters and the like. We could even see Jarvis aggressively Pyroblast a cantrip here or there. Rudy is stumbling on lands, and, getting your mana into play is pretty important in this matchup where you're trying to cast multiple 2 and 3 mana spells each turn.
Yeah, it's one of those like yes and no scenarios. So like you kind of want to stop around like maybe 5 or 6 lands, because this isn't like a Delver Mirror. Like your interaction is maybe like some Flusterstorms, or in Jarvis's case like Spell Pierces, and they're not gonna have Force of Will. So actually you're playing like more of a literal gen fight with like, you have instant speed stuff, but you're not actually playing many counters. So like other than like Brainstorm and Jace like sculpting the draws, like having like an excess of lands, like this isn't like draw go by any means. Like they're like, you are actually slogging through cards, and I think the best card like both people can be drawing in this situation is actually Hymn to Torok, and Rudy found one here. And like, because you're still just in this phase, like currently both lands and spells are good. So if you get to him your opponent, or like even just like Kolaghan's Command to make them discard and get back Strix, like I suggested earlier on, just like is going to hit like something that matters. But then when you get to like turn Exploding Kittens, like we talked about earlier, where that you just have all these cards in your hand and like some of them do nothing, then like your Kolaghan's Command making them discard is worse. So I actually want to play those cards earlier with the intention of snapping them back on like 5 mana. So like it's actually like similar to the development of like aggro or creature-based like matchups where you're trying to curve out and do this thing. That actually happens in stages and controls mirrors here. And I think there are some approaches that are being taken differently than what is intuitive to me. And it is clear how both players like to play Magic, actually. And that's part of what I like about Legacy. Like, you could tell that, like, Rudy's kind of the kind of person that likes jamming a little bit more and, like, making the opponent have in a lot of spots. And Jarvis is a robot, so interpret that however you want.
Shout out to the LPL trailer picture for this week. If you haven't seen it, just
was that the Jarvinator?
The Jarvinator. That was super sweet. I love it. So now Gurmag Angler is one of those cards that sort of just like breaks open this matchup to a degree. Yep. I feel like with Baleful Strix, especially as insulation.
So Jarvis gets to try to Delver here. So like I clasp it. Yeah, that picture's just great. so I like to oversimplify like a lot of things just in terms of like terminology, because I mean more words than I'm actually saying sometimes, and I already talk a lot. So by like Delvering someone, I mean like you're just trying to allow them to have all these cards in their hand in some scenarios and just barely kill them. Mm-hmm. Jarvis was allowed to do that once his like angler was like the answer quote to his angler was a Baleful Strix. It's like, okay, I'm just gonna sacrifice all these cards and you're getting Lava Axed every turn. And then like with having Jace with an opponent that like is stumbling on mana, now you just 2-prong attack them. And like this is a similar situation you can get Miracles into, where it's just like, hey, you're gonna have to wrath my board and I have this like Planeswalker. Like that's kind of what Rudy's fighting against. So we actually see elements of other matchups being seen in a control mirror, in a mirror where they almost have like the same 75. We actually see elements of Grixis versus Miracles and Delver versus Grixis.
Yeah, and so this is interesting. So because now I know Rudy doesn't really know what's in Jarvis's hand, but I don't know. This block on the Gurmag Angler is kind of interesting. Maybe it's just an allusion to like the last match where Rudy was afraid of just getting burned out of the game. But Gurmag Angler seems like it's just going to cause a lot of headaches, and I really do like deploying, I guess, the more expensive threats in our hand. So maybe even just taking 5 to the face there was a potential option.
Yeah, I understand what you're saying, but I do also very much understand Rudy's point of view. I think at the end of the day, I might have landed on Rudy's play.
Yeah. Now this is interesting. We are getting to the point where this Delver strategy is actually just doing so much work.
I really like that plus.
Yeah. God, this is such a back and forth matchup. I mean, Rudy's definitely like on the back pedal here, but I feel like
yeah, like all these lands are like doing nothing for Jarvis. Jarvis is very just in on this Gurmag Angler.
Right. I mean, take 3, go to 3. Maybe get back then Rudy can get back a Baleful Strix. Sort of just like
I think you're pretty incentivized to attack Rudy here. Just like you unlock every Snapcaster Mage and then Kolaghan's Command for the 1 Snapcaster in your graveyard as win cons. I think you just send to Rudy's face.
Yeah, I mean, both players also kept in all copies of Lightning Bolt.
Jarvis boarded out 1.
Okay.
But Jarvis had 3, I think, whereas normally they play 2.
Gotcha. And so here,
the Strix is a good draw.
Yeah, that was a very good draw. Then you can. Oh no, wait. Oh, okay. So sorry, that's the -2 for Liliana. And that's it.
Wait, we have fancy true names now?
I think this is the reprinted artwork.
What? Reprinted? What does that even mean?
It got reprinted in one of the sets. I don't remember which one it is, but this is definitely
the real life one has the same art. Oh my god! All right, so we get this other Liliana. Yeah, maybe we just all got free promos today or something. I'll check my fan mail later. But drawing Liliana the last set was probably one of the best draws for Jarvis. He gets to get back into 2-prong attack scenario.
And then also Rudy
just
being
win the
life.
Game.
Yeah, exactly.
Sorry, I forgot he had defense. Well, we don't get to see Jarvis' secret deck, right?
Yeah, we don't, which means that it might show up next week, but I don't know.
Oh man.
So, yeah, congratulations to Jarvis. You taking it once again 3-1 in the losers final. That means he will be advancing to the grand finals, where he will be battling against the Epic Storm master himself, Bryant Cook. That's going to be pretty exciting. I'm really excited. This was great. 2.5 hours of Legacy. We saw Jarvis bring Miracles against Blue-Black Omni, winning, I believe it was 2-0. And then Humans stomping Miracles, giving Rudy the tie up. Briksza coming in from Jarvis, and then Briksza again from Rudy. So Jarvis is advancing to the grand finals here, where both players will be competing for the trophy. And this means, though, if we take a look at the graphic on board, Jarvis will have to win 2 best of 5s in order to claim the champion. He's going to have to reset the bracket in order to win the title. And he is our reigning champion, right? So, I mean, who knows? Maybe he'll win back-to-back Season 2, Season 3. But Bryant Cook has also just been on fire, so I wouldn't be surprised to see Bryant just, bring some crazy stuff to the table and, just win it all.
Let's get some Jarvis claps and the Destructoid things for Jarvis. But Rudy did a great job this LPL, being able to destroy everyone's bracket within the first week, and he made it a lot further than I'm sure a lot of other people did. But as one of the people Rudy seems to credit with getting into pro Magic, I've seen him grow throughout the years, and it's cool to see him kind of dominate on the stage. So it kind of stinks not being able to see him battle some more, but Jarvis is a pretty good friend of mine too, and it's great to see him battling in the finals.
I gotta say that trash talk is nice. I love it. I love a little bit of trash talk to spice up the game. Bryant Cook saying Rudy not as tough as Jarvis, but I don't know. We'll see.
He's definitely cooking up the trash talk there, right?
But okay. So I don't know. Do we have any more giveaways? Because if not, I think we're going to wrap it up for this week's broadcast of LPL. Okay, perfect. Yeah, so nothing else today. But thank you guys so much for joining us. Jonathan, thank you so much for being in the commentary booth.
Yeah, thanks. I'm so glad to have done this. It's my first time, and I had a blast. It was great, and thanks for doing this with me on your rug.
Yeah, no problem. And special shout outs to Card Hoarder and MTG First for sponsoring this event, with also shout outs to Cardboard Live and MTG The Epic Storm. Thank you so much, everyone, for joining us, and we'll see you again next week.
Yeah. See you guys later.